Life Audio.
Hey, Dr. Bill Sinyard here with the Gospel Rant. Thanks for listening. We're going through the greatest gospel presentation of God's love for the unlovable in the Old Testament. Yep. And unfortunately, we've spent millennia overlooking this important book or misunderstanding it or misrepresenting it. I don't think it's a conspiracy. It's well-meaning. We've just missed it. No more. And I know this isn't how you've heard the Song of Songs taught, but stay with me, and it could change your lives and begin to heal relational, emotional wounds and hurts. It's the message of God's love for the unlovable. Look, you know Christians who are hurting, who feel church damaged, who feel lost. I got my hair cut this week by a very kind lady who described herself as a Christo-pagan. I mean, her story is filled with she-shaming by abusive, ultra-Orthodox, strict, patriarchal churches and family members, and she agreed with my assessment that she was church damaged. What she was looking for is what I'm looking for, more of God's love for the unlovable, but she didn't find it in her institutional religion. FYI, I am rewriting my decade-old book, The Kiss of God, and it's going to be a brand new explosive book on the Song of Songs, so please pray for the project, get the buzz out there. I think it's going to be explosive. It's time to see the gospel of God's love for the unlovable more clearly. In the church, for sure, and in the world. Oh my goodness, look around. If you want to get notified on its progress when it goes to a publisher, actually I need to find a publisher first, go to gospelrant.com, register there. And by the way, just for registering, you will get a free gift as well. All right, we'll see you in a moment. We'll be right back after an important word from our sponsors.
Hey there, it's Nicole Eunice, host of the How to Study the Bible podcast, where every single week we join together to encounter God through His Word. You can subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
All right, welcome back. The great director D.W. Griffith once said that great directors make people see. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's my role. My passion is to make us see what this little ancient Hebrew book of poetry is trying to say to us. Why did God incarnate love ditties in the ancient world, right? So first of all, a little technical stuff. I don't want to lose you. After studying this 117-verse book for over a decade, I've come to the conclusion that it has 7 distinctive movements in a chiastic formation. Look, this is highly structured ancient Hebrew poetry, so get out of your head the modern notions of roses are red, violets are blue, and then, the end of the line rhyming with the one before. Hebrew poetry has less rhyming at the end of lines and more parallelism, more repeated structures and themes and lines and imagery and chiasms. When you register at gospelrant.com, we're going to send you a diagram with this on it, this structure, and I think it would be very helpful to get as you read the Song of Songs and follow along. And again, you get another free gift as well. So in the song, imagine a pyramid overarching structure. The base of the pyramid is a prologue, chapter 1, verses 2 to 4, balanced by an epilogue, 8 verses 5 to 14. And we looked at the prologue in the last podcast. Then there is movement 1, which is 1:5 to 2:7, balanced by a parallel movement 7. That's chapter 7, 11 to 8, verse 4. Then movements 2, chapter 2, 18 to 17, and 6, chapter 6, 4 to 7 to 10. Then 3 and 5, movement 3 is chapter 3, verses 1 to 5, and movement 5 is chapter 5, verses 2 to 6, 3. All literarily pushing the reader to the pinnacle movement 4. That's chapter 3, verse 6 to 5, verse 1. And movement 4 is the shocking, scandalous, amazing, unlikely, incongruous marriage between the king and his unlikely queen. And there is an arguable pinnacle verse in movement 4, the pinnacle of movement 4, where the king is adoring his new bride from head to toe, and he cries out, "All beautiful you are, my darling. There is no flaw in you." And so the mystery. We know because she tells us she is hardly perfect. She isn't worthy of the king. It's a scandalous marriage, and it seems everyone else can see it except the king. In his eyes, she is stunning, amazing, perfect. He does zero shaming. Zero. No she shaming from him. He can't love her any more or any less than he does right now. Listen as she is. Are you hearing the gospel? This is what Jesus purchased for you and me. And he loves her far more than anyone else has ever loved her, and clearly more than she loves herself. Who does the king's love scandalize the most? Her. Yep, she can't believe it. She can't trust it. Her brain will not let its emotional defenses down, largely subconscious. She can't enter into his love. And the mystery of prophetic poetry, this is you, this is me. And Jesus purchased this amazing love for eternity for us. I get it. But experiencing it right now is difficult, and we probably haven't felt it as much as we'd like. So let's change that, okay? Two main characters, the great lover king and the queen beloved. There's some minor characters we'll talk about. Poetically speaking, prophetically speaking, this is God and you, God and me today. So in the last podcast, we left the queen in a state of euphoria in the arms of her beloved. She was actually feeling love for a moment. I mean, it's a little bit twisted, but she was feeling it. In movement 1, we get to see her at a wholly other place. This amazing, sophisticated ancient writings. It appears almost modern. She appears like a modern woman, and she is riddled with identity and emotional holes. One author put it this way: people don't know that the hole, the sense of deficiency, is a symptom of a loss of something deeper, the loss of essence, which can be regained. They think the hole, the deficiency, is how they really are at the deepest level, and that there is nothing beyond it. They think something is wrong with them. Something is basically wrong. And this is where the king finds the queen, every movement, by the way, and where God finds us every day. All right. Movement number 1, chapter 1, verses 5 to chapter 2, verses 7. It's a long movement. And the mystery, the plot of the poems is that the great lover king actually and irreversibly loves and romantically pursues with all the love in his vast heart the troubled, afraid, relationally destructive, unfaithful to the core, tone deaf to others, self-destructive, shamed, and traumatized queen. So we begin the first movement with her inmost, very personal human fears related to this wonderful and scary relationship. She ambivalently, deeply desires the presence of her great lover king, and not just the presence, but the presence of an adoring partner who can't love her any more than he does this very moment, because she doesn't love herself that much, right? But she's also frightened by that as well. So she desires and is frightened by it as well. And subconsciously, she's cautious, she's suspicious, she acts out, she can't emotionally regulate. And look, she, like each of us, have two subconscious questions. I'm an attachment theory fan, and here they are, the two driving subconscious questions that are in all of our brains. Number 1, is there anyone out there I can really count on to have my back when I mess up, when I fall short, when I don't act my best, when I make mistakes? Does anybody have my back? That's question number 1. Question number 2, is there anyone out there who really sees me as lovable as I am? The first one is connectedness, and the second one is enoughness. I'll say more about that. The queen would likely have been told, and we'll get the deeper story, and suspected that she was a mess. She was a hot mess, and a stigma to her family and tribe, and of course God. So the way she talks is typical of a traumatized adult, largely conditioned by painful events. Probably happened early and often. Maybe she was abused, maybe as a child. Maybe her father was critical, absent emotional, physical. Maybe he died. Lots of reasons she is what she is. And it's normal. Human reactionary behavior is not evil, not necessarily. She's needy and broken. That's the idea. And as a result, she's self-protecting to a fault, self-deprecating, another defensive strategy. And she can explode in anger and rage when triggered, blaming anyone or anything. she cannot trust, she cannot love, she cannot be loved, not yet. Again, this is where God finds us. So per the attachment theory, she is some degree anxious or avoidant or some combination because of actual or perceived relational deprivation and abuse, probably even as young as age 1. The king, on the other hand, boy, what a contrast. He's perfectly secure in his skin. He seems present all the time. So imagine as you read the poems that he's always there. He's always holding her. He's always romancing her. He never leaves. Yet to her, he seems absent sometimes. He seems close and yet distant, at least from her point of view. It's brilliant. This is the Song of Songs of Solomon. All right, we start here. We start with the queen's enigmatic, ambivalent, and harsh self-analysis. Dark I am, yet lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. I mean, you get a theme here, right? There's been clearly a change of subject and tone from verses 1 to 4. The verses 1 to 4 are about her desire for her lover. It's her want for him. The king, her statement of she's experiencing his desire for her and feeling a little secure in the relationship. And we don't see that in verse 5 and following. There's a shift from prologue to movement 1. So verse 5, the lens of the poem and the reader turn to her, a shocking vulnerability. And biblically unprecedented and actually kind of modern. Now, we do have the psalmists who speak of oppression and pain under attack, Psalm 22, Psalm 88, Psalm 51, and they may make heartfelt confessions of shame and guilt and fear. Often they blame God for their turmoil or they plead to God for a rescue. Here we go, our darkness theme. The author of Psalm 88 blames God for his state and sarcastically complains at the end, "You've taken my companions and loved ones from me, and darkness is my closest friend." But we don't get the sense that the woman is blaming God or reaching out to God for a rescue. She's not saying darkness is anything close to a friend. She's just letting us in on her most personal, revealed feelings. Anne Lamott speaks of an inner sense of disfigurement, a deep shame that we all have. And the Queen's giving it words, giving it voice. The Queen doesn't have modern technical terms at her disposal like ambivalence, depression, victimization, avoidance, anxiety, suicide ideation, shame. But we can see all of those nasty fingerprints as we go through, particularly movement 1. She cries out, "I am dark yet lovely." And I think we can relate, right? These are the most impressive 3 Hebrew words anywhere, I would suggest. You know, what in the world am I thinking is kind of an equivalent. If we were to transport back to see this woman face to face, let me ask you, what do you expect to see? Do you imagine that you would see a ravishing beauty that would cause your knees to buckle? Is she a model, supermodel that would be suitable for the latest makeup commercial? If you're a lady, would you feel some jealousy at her regal stature, her maturity, confidence of this remarkable lady, a queen? Or do you suspect that you might see a rake-thin, sunburned woman with hard, calloused hands, broken fingernails, bags under her young eyes from years of hard field labor and mistreatment, her hair with early graying, unkempt, her tired shoulders slumped, clothes torn, not more than rough coverings, quite baggy for protection and comfort in her work in the sun, far more than to enhance this or that bodily curve? Which would it be? And would you blame her for saying, "I'm dark yet lovely"? Or do you see her as an angry, complaining, pubescent girl who needs an audience to vent her grievings? You know, somebody that would be just irritating. Or maybe you would look at her and think something like, you know, if she had a different life, if she had been born into wealth and comfort, a culture that honored women more, maybe this poor lady might have been attractive and maybe even royal, but certainly desirable. So in your mind's eye, when you look at her, how does she come across to you? Maybe she just disappears into the vineyard landscape. Maybe she's a shadow, maybe a wraith, one of the so many beat-up laborers, unnamed, who prefer not to be noticed or seen, just internalizing the pain. Or is she bitter, angry, externalizing, defiant? Maybe you can see in her eyes that she has legitimate beef with life and her family and with God. It wouldn't take much more than a look for her to trigger and pour her complaints onto anyone who might pay attention. Wow. That's a broad spectrum, right? And it's the nature of good poetry that we're invited to see this subject in that broad spectrum through those lenses. Not only that, but all readers must be aware that we can only see her through subjective lenses. We hear the poems through our own context. Maybe you, as you're listening to this, can powerfully relate to this unfortunate woman. Well, listen, no matter what you think of her, nothing has hurt her more than relationships that have not lived up to what one would expect. Even those moments of intimacy where she made bad choices, we'll see, didn't live up to her hopes. And so she says this. This is my interpretive expanded translation. "O daughters of Jerusalem, though I'm attractive in some ways, my skin betrays me. See the dark tan? It clearly evidences the hours working in the fields. See, it's not pasty white like pampered princesses who were raised in shaded courts. It's earthy and dark, like tints of desert raiders, like dark curtains of the temple. Please do not stare judgmentally at me, for I am not by nature royalty. I never will be. The sun has burnt my skin." It's a simple phrase, dark yet lovely, but it captures all of that. It's brilliant. And by the way, she doesn't say lovely and a dash of darkness. She leads with dark. The addition of yet lovely or yet beautiful adds a tragic ambivalence to the character. Maybe it connotes, I could have been ravishing or regal or enviable or desirable if I only had a different life, a different family, born at a different time, if I'd made better choices. But that ship's left the dock. I was promising as a young girl, but then the world did what it does to young girls who are of little cultural worth. I'm spent, and yet just a young girl still. By the way, a word about her age. I don't know if you might find this shocking. It was very common for girls in ancient Israel to be betrothed at 12 and a half years, right after their first menstruation. The queen could be easily slightly older than that. Think 14, 15, but still, in modern terms, an adolescent. Her brothers likely see her that way. Here's their observation at the end of the song. They say, "We have a young sister, and her breasts are not yet grown." That's chapter 8, verse 8. So that's their point of view. She's just a kid. And it seems like she got one thing right, as we'll see. Her family was not a good source of emotional security and safety and honor for her at all. All right, this is probably a good time to pause, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll get back to her testimony. See you in a moment.
What happens when a writer and former history teacher goes toe-to-toe with his best friend, a nationally touring stand-up comedian? Total carnage, that's what. 2 men enter, and 2 men leave, because that's how it works.
Actually, you get hilarious, real, and insightful conversations about life, history, culture, faith, and everything in between.
Join me, comedian Johnny W., and my pal, author and speaker John Driver for Talk About That at lifeaudio.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome back. Back to the Queen's testimony, verse 6. She says, "My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards." Here's my expanded translation. "It started so early for me. My brothers were mean to me. They forced me to be a hired hand in the vineyard. You wouldn't do that to a young girl that you loved or thought had value and needed to be protected." Whew. So my brothers, my mother's sons, they were so angry, the Hebrew is hara, that she could feel the heat. The word is related to a rare Aramaic root meaning to cause fire to burn. So the Hebrew verb is always used in reference to burning anger. So she's feeling the heat. So it's not just darkness, it's darkness caused by heat. And it has the a complementary aspect of emotional anger with the heat of a burning destructive fire. And some common synonyms that we might use would be fury or indignation or ire or wrath, right? So all those words have connotation of intense emotional state induced by displeasure. And she could see it. She could feel it in their eyes. Let me change it around a little bit. Her brothers angrily made her work the vineyard. It was a very patriarchal culture, so we shouldn't be a little surprised that she could be made to work by her brothers, even in harsh conditions. They wouldn't often have a say in what they were told to do. That could be part of it. But from her point of view, there's more. She feels that her brother's demands to work the field is a punishment of sort, a burning like she got from the sun. So from her point of view, they were enraged at her. They had immense displeasure in her and made her suffer as a worker in the vineyard. No sense of worth or honor or family or safety. Nobody has her back. And look, vineyard, it was a hard work. Israel has large regions of rocky hills where crops can't grow and there's little grass for sheep to graze. But between the rocks, there are cracks that are deep. And in those cracks, way down is good soil that, you can grow good grapes or olive trees or fruit trees. So the vineyard worker must remove stones and weeds using a hoe or mattock. The stones are used to create a low wall that surrounds and protects the vines. Terraces must be shaped and managed. Vine shoots must be carefully planted, watered, pruned, and cared for. Vineyards typically had a stone tower in the middle to guard against thieves and animals that would plunder the ripe fruit. And the tower would provide shade from the intense Israeli sun. Manual harvesting would take place in August and the grapes sent to a wine press for processing. And you can imagine all of that was not a place for a vulnerable young 12-year-old or 10-year-old or 11-year-old whose reputation should be guarded. Look, I did some research. Were there female vineyard workers? Not that I've found. When workers are referred to in the New Testament, they were almost always masculine, Matthew 20, verses 1 to 16. But we can give credit to women for their role in discovering wine. This is fun. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, a woman of the king's harem was suffering from headaches and other physical ailments and just wanted to commit suicide. She came upon a special vat that had been labeled poison and drank it. And the vat contained grape juice that had fermented and become bitter. It had been laid aside and labeled poison because it was unfit to serve to the king. Well, the young woman didn't die. In fact, she felt better. And it's written that she repeated the experiment over and over, our first alcoholic, until she started to feel much better. She returned to her role in the harem. Well, the word got to the king, and he ordered large quantities of the poison to be served. And so he and his courtiers took great pleasure in poisoning themselves. And they renamed the bitter drink Zarchosh, or the pleasant poison. Now, wouldn't that be a label for wine today? Oh, my goodness. I think I should do that. And maybe this is the reason behind a prominent role of wine and vineyard goddesses. I mean, long before the relative latecomer Dionysus. So enough of the history lesson. Listen, in this case, the queen didn't consider herself much of a goddess. She was helpless, and she was being oppressed and having to do things that were harming to her against her will. From her point of view, that's all we have. She was forced against her will, and her brothers were angry at her and dismissive and oppressive, and she didn't have any respite. She had no rescuer. She didn't have anybody who had her back. Remember, one of the questions was, is there anybody who I can count on to have my back? So did she do something that caused them to be angry? Did she say something? We're not told, but we can surmise that from her point of view, her family is not secure and supportive, traumatized relationally. So no one in her close family was there for her, had her back, made her feel loved or lovable. Okay, and she says, I'm darkened by the sun. I've been gazed upon by the sun. Literally, the Hebrew word is shazaf, and it refers to not just a gazing, but an intense burning stare. See, there's that burning again. It's much like the brother's burning anger, and it scorches her skin black. It causes pain and diminished social value. She's not as attractive. So she's not only confessing that her family of origin wasn't a safe place, the entire world burns her too. That's her testimony. And lastly, she pleads to whoever her immediate audience is, don't stare at me because I'm dark, meaning don't you burn me either. Don't look down upon me like the son did, or with anger and despised like my family. I mean, is she pleading? Is she defiant? Probably a little of both. She doesn't suspect that she's going to find anybody who has her back. Is it an overstatement? This is her testimony. And there's one last perpetrator who's burned her, diminished her sense of worth and value. It's the queen herself. And we're going to pick that up next time. In summary, from her point of view, her entire world has scorched the value out of her. Her caregivers who are supposed to protect her, she saw as unsafe, abusive, indifferent, burning. The ever-present Israeli sun took advantage and burned her, and then she suffered burning at her own hand as well. We'll see that next time. And she's just not able to stop the shaming. The beatdown was complete. Look, we all know her. Honestly, maybe you are her. Welcome. And listen, this is where God finds her, finds you, finds me, not just at our conversion, but yesterday, today, tomorrow. And that's the point. We still need to feel God's love for the unlovable. And I mean, to be clear, I'm not talking about having it. Jesus already purchased it for us 2,000 years ago. I'm speaking about experiencing it in my midbrain today. Now, I mean, can you imagine the difference it would make for you and me to experience being in the embrace of God without any hesitancy, without doubts or anxieties, the fears that he might see my dark secrets and change his mind? How would that affect all my other relationships, my longing for more of a sense of worth, value, identity issues? It would be huge. This is the secret working of the Holy Spirit, says theologian John Calvin, to make me experience the favor of God today. So the thing we are learning is that the reason I can't seem to experience it much is that my midbrain has been so beat up, disappointed by relationship after relationship, that has set up powerful protective boundaries, strongholds to keep me from getting hurt again. But it's screaming out to experience the love of Christ that he purchased 2,000 years ago. And we have to access the power from God in order to defeat the subconscious strongholds over and over again. Thus, sanctification is a reduction of the time in between experiences of the love for unlovables of God. And we can help. We created a little bookmark prayer that you can say aloud to your beat-up midbrain. Think of it as a gospel presentation to an unreached people group, your critical inner voice. It'll take repetition 2 to 3 times a day for 30 days or so, but you'll be surprised at the difference it makes. It sounds absurd, but I can tell you story after story of transformations, a little or a lot. And how does it do this? It reflects the gospel. The gospel is the power of God to believe, says Paul in Romans 1. Believe what? Well, among the many things is to believe and experience that God actually loves you that much. So here it is. Just listen. Jesus follower, strictly because of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, God actually loves you. He loves you with all of his heart, as much as the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. He can't love you any more or any less than he does right now. He loves you as you are, not as you should be or could be. You can't add to this love or take away from it. Now, I get it. It often feels like you've messed it up or need to do something so that God would like you better. Not so. How do you experience it more now? Simple. Good news. There is something you can do and are invited to do. You can take daily baby steps to ask the Spirit inside of you to make you know, experience, and feel just how much God loves you right now. Just ask. Ask again later today. Ask tomorrow. Make it a spiritual habit. And hey, we made it into bookmark form for you. You can get that from the webpage store, www.gospelrant, one word, gospelrant.com. Get a bunch, hand them out to family and friends, your church. They will thank you. And while you're at the podcast page, you can do me a big favor. Click follow, and so you can get future podcasts and register. You will get the Song of Songs diagram and another free gift. And remember, I'm rewriting the book, The Song of Songs. If you are on the mailing list, you will get a heads up when we're about to publish. And believe me, this book is going to take the roof off of spiritual formation and a lot of spiritual counseling. Your support is important to me. Let me know what you're getting out of this series. Bill at gospel-app.com, and give the podcast a review. It might encourage, you'd be surprised, it probably will encourage someone else to listen to it. Thanks ahead of time. Look, is all of this relevant? At the top of the podcast, I mentioned my new friend who is a self-described Christo-pagan. I mean, do you think she's looking for anything really different than the Queen is? Or you or me? She's just run from the regular beatdown that she experienced in her churches and her families. But this would be true for that divorced woman who comes to feel soiled somehow, or that young man who is secretly exploring sexuality options, knowing that he's going to become a pariah in his community if he gets outed, or the young man jonesing on porn, or the pastor who's having affair after an affair. All Christians strictly due to the work of Christ, and so right now they are loved by God as much as the Father loves the Son and the Spirit, and the Son and the Spirit love the Father, but they can't seem to experience it. We can't seem to experience it as much as we want. And no one has really told them a way to begin to hear the music again. So many young adults have fled the church, and they just want more. You can help me get this message to them. And sure, they may be cynical, but our job is to get the word out about God's love for unlovables. Thanks for being a co-conspirator. Pray for us, and anything else you can do that you can think of, I want to thank you ahead of time. We'll pick it up here in the next podcast. Thanks to lifeaudio.com for their platform and support. Take heart, child of God.
Have you ever found yourself in a moment with your loved ones where you were there, but you weren't all there?
Let's be honest, we've all given our leftovers to our biggest fans instead of our best.
For Dr. Josh and Christy Straub, marriage and leadership coaches and host of the Famous at Home podcast.
With a realistic, grace-filled look at the struggles families face, we cover topics designed to help you become a rock star under your roof, set healthy rhythms between work and home, and build a rock-solid marriage.
Because the greatest red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door.